Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session of the UK Trade and Business Commission, which is coming live from Belfast, and in fact is our first live session rather than I'd like to thank all of our witnesses for being with us today, and in a minute I'll ask them to briefly introduce themselves. The focus of the Commission's visit here is to gather evidence and improve our understanding of the issues facing businesses in Northern Ireland, so that we can put in evidence-based recommendations to both the UK and the EU side in their negotiations, in the hope that an agreement can be reached which will benefit all sides, but in particular the people and businesses of Northern Ireland. In this session, we're going to focus on the practical realities of the operation of the protocol, and we're going to hear from representatives of the Northern Ireland business community about their experiences of it and how they are finding the negotiations that are currently going on to implement the protocol and to get their views on what needs to change. We hope that we're going to derive a number of very practical lessons from this, which will inform some very effective recommendations. So now I'd like to start by asking our witnesses to introduce themselves. Frankie, could I start with you?
Frankie Devlin, I'm a tax partner in KPMG in Belfast, and I'm also a member of the Northern Ireland Business Brexit Working Group for the last 2 years. So again, we, as a firm, we obviously represent and advise clients right across the island of Ireland, but also in Great Britain as well. So again, a lot of popped up over the last number of years. We've been speaking to clients about that, particularly on customs and VAT issues.
Thank you.
Denise Walsh, Dairy Council Northern Ireland and Lakeland Dairies Cooperative Society. The dairy industry is a cross-border activity and have been very active in our Brexit planning post-Brexit space.
Fiona Derry, Director, Dairy Group Ireland. Dairy Group is a logistics firm operating on the island of Ireland. We work for all major food producers, CDCs and wholesalers throughout Northern Ireland and throughout the island of Ireland. We specialise in the transport of mixed product, chilled and frozen. So it's been a particularly challenging couple of years where we have faced a lot of obstacles and we've overcome them. So it's definitely been interesting, and there's been a lot of pros and negatives over the last number of years. And indeed, the protocol, we've seen a major change with the protocol and how it's really allowed the food production industry in Northern Ireland to flourish.
Thank you. Stephen.
Vice Chair Stephen Kelly. I'm Chief Executive of Manufacturing Northern Ireland. I'm manufacturing anything from chicken wings to airplane wings and everything in between, so it's the broadest possible definition. Manufacturing represents a larger part of the Northern Ireland economy than it does the rest of the UK economy. The protocol has brought both benefits but also challenges, which I'm sure the committee will explore with us today.
Thank you. We have two witnesses online. Victor, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Victor Chestnut. I'm currently president of the Ulster Farmers Union, representing agriculture and farming. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Stuart.
Hi, I'm Stuart Lendrum from Iceland Foods. We've both a business in Northern Ireland, which we're lucky enough to be able to operate under Stanley at the moment, but we also have a business in Southern Ireland, and so we're very clear of the really damaging impacts of operating under full EU SPS conditions.
For our witnesses' benefit, we'll allow about 8 minutes for each question, and I will do my best to enforce the time. So we'd like to start with a framing question, just to put this in context for our listeners. Could you please tell us about the main trading activities within the Northern Ireland economy, how they work east-west, how they work north-south, and how much trade goes further afield in the world? And finally, what is the key role of Northern Ireland in wider supply chains outside the country? Frankie, perhaps I'll start with you.
Yeah, probably to start with, I mean, obviously Northern Ireland's a very small country, 1.9 million people. So within that, we do a lot of trading activities in terms of goods and services. In terms of the range across, and again, I don't have specific percentages for each of these, but manufacturing is a very significant trading activity across Northern Ireland. Again, in manufacturing, significant commercial processing, and often we are in Northern Ireland what we would call an intermediary in relation to that. So we're taking parts, we're doing something to it, and maybe we're passing it on to someone else in the Republic of Ireland or another member state or in Great Britain. So we're not necessarily always making the finished product. In some cases we are, but in many cases we're an intermediary. So that is impacted by the protocol. In terms of other major sectors, obviously retail and wholesale is very significant. Leisure and tourism is a very significant sector. Obviously tourism was doing very well sort of pre-COVID, and hopefully it will again. We also have a very strong professional services sector in terms of accountancy, legal, and a whole range of other professional services. So again, very well educated workforce and represented right across all of those professions. In terms of maybe very quickly the part about where we're supplying to, and again, these statistics aren't up to date. It's hard to get very up-to-date statistics. So these are probably more 2018, 2019 statistics from the Northern Ireland Statistics Agency. But total sales in relation to goods from Northern Ireland, 21.7 billion. And that's broken down in terms of sales to Great Britain, of about 10.6 billion. So that's about 49% of that figure. The remaining 51% then is what we would call export sales. So again, that's broken down between EU sales, 31%, and rest of world is the remaining 20%. So again, I suppose it does indicate that we are selling goods and parts into multiple markets. Great Britain is obviously very significant. Republic of Ireland, which has been growing quite significantly in the last number of years as well, is very significant. But again, quite a significant export market to the rest of the EU and the rest of the world.
Thank you very much. Stephen, would you like to?
Yeah, just to add to what Frankie has said, our manufactured goods tend to be intermediate goods. About 70% of what we produce is components, ingredients, raw materials for others to take in markets in the UK, in Europe, and further afield, and actually turn into that final product. So the movement of those intermediate goods is kind of critically important, and that could take a number of border movements, for want of a, to make this relevant to the protocol, where a part could come in a variety of different origins, be commercially processed in Northern Ireland, remove itself from Northern Ireland into the UK or to Ireland or further afield, where another process takes place, then comes back to us once again, etc., etc., etc. So the issue of Brexit and the issue of the protocol, in many respects, from a manufacturing community, is an existential issue. That free movement of those goods across these islands and beyond these islands is critical to that success of our manufacturing community. As I mentioned in a very brief introduction, manufacturing represents a larger part of our economy than in the rest of the UK. And in fact, if you look at the UK economy and the Northern Ireland economy, it's almost like a mirror image of each other. Where here, manufacturing dominates that source of external sales, and services are a smaller proportion, whereas in the UK, services dominate those external sales, and manufacturing and goods are a smaller proportion. So from an income point of view, it's about £15 billion in total of external income, which is more than what the Northern Ireland Executive get from Treasury in order to run public services in Northern Ireland. So we really don't have an economy in Northern Ireland unless we have that free movement of goods, which is why the business community here were so exercised about Brexit as an issue. So exercised about trying to make sure that where we've ended up actually works on behalf of the Northern Ireland economy, because it is an existential issue in terms of employment and an existential issue in terms of life as we know it in Northern Ireland. One thing finally to add is that one of the real benefits of manufacturing is that it's largely not based in the cities. And I know we're speaking today from Belfast, which is a dairyman is the second city in Northern Ireland. But the manufacturing community dominates our rural economy. So you'll go to sub-regional areas like Mid-Ulster, where more than half the jobs are dependent upon the manufacturing sector. You go to Armagh, Banbridge and Craigavon, Mid and East Antrim council areas, 40% of the jobs are dependent upon the manufacturing community. So that's why we need to get this right. It's not just about pounds and pence, but it's about people's real lives in communities where they like to live, where they like to build a home and a family and contribute to the local community. So that's why we're so exercised and continue to be exercised on this matter.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
I'd like to concur with Stephen just in regard to the regional benefits of the protocol. I think it has to be acknowledged from my perspective, and I think we all know Northern Ireland, we're a traditional farming community. London is your banking community. Dublin is recognised as tech. We are a traditional farming community, and food production, food manufacturers have been able to build on their business due to the traditional farming community that is here. I think Victor can expand more in regard to the farming links with the Republic of Ireland and how important those ties are in terms of trade. And I think we should take today also to acknowledge the work that's been done by local producers and manufacturers in the last number of years. Particularly, we would have seen in June 2021 when British supermarkets and other supermarkets were scrambling to fill gaps on the market shelves. And it was our local producers in Northern Ireland, it was the local producer in the regional areas of Northern Ireland that were able to put up their hand and say, hey, we can fill that gap. Companies dramatically changed their supply chains. They finally saw that there's a high quality product in Northern Ireland. They don't need to import. And it was only when this challenge came about that they did start to look locally. And I think we should be very proud of our local producers that have been able to meet those gaps. Even if you go into the likes of Sainsbury's in Northern Ireland, you can see that there's more local producers in recent months due to the challenges that they faced in light of Brexit. And I would say that it was definitely underestimated. And I think there's a massive opportunity for Northern Ireland to widen our horizons now that we have unfettered access to mainland UK and to the European Union and the small economy that we have here. It's a major opportunity to build on it. And I know we talk about manufacturing goods, but let's just look at what we're good at. And that's the point I'd like to make today, just with regard to our agricultural. And we do have something there and we should build on it.
Thank you very much. Very quickly, Victor, would you like to add anything to that?
Yes, thanks and good afternoon, folks. Yeah, look, the agri-food industry in the island of Ireland is totally integrated. I'm sure you've heard me before, about 40% of our milk goes south for processing, some which goes back to be exported into the UK or to go to have our, I suppose it's not an export technically, but into the UK mainland. 40 to 50% of our sheep traditionally went south for slaughter. And the one thing, on the other side, of a lot of pigs came north for slaughter from the south. So the food supply chain is totally integrated in Ireland. One of the things that our biggest fears in Brexit is that supply chain would break down. That hasn't happened. Our milk still flows south. But I think as, we have somebody there from Lakeland, the problem is when we go to sell that, it has this horrible label on it, mixed origin. And we would like to see it, some sort of a fudge been made on that label, whether it be produced under EU rules or whether it be produce of the island of Ireland or whatever. But we can't have that mixed origin label on it. So look, on our produce side, the protocol is working fairly well. There is other issues that we will come to later in our meeting, I'm sure, but I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And let's move on to the next question, Hilary.
Well, Peter, thank you very much indeed. As a commission, we've spent the last year or so looking at the implications of our changed trading relationship with the EU. And we're here in Northern Ireland today to look at the impact of that and of the Northern Ireland Protocol. What I'm interested in is what's changed and what has been the impact for good or for ill, because we've already heard there's a mixture. Perhaps I could start with you, Stuart, if that's all right.
Yeah, no problem at all. I guess to give you the context of the change, Iceland Foods has 1,000 stores across the UK and has 33 stores in Northern Ireland. And our stores are typically small high street stores serving the local community. So a lot of families who are living on a very tight budget and often struggling to make ends meet. So people who are very sensitive to cost and availability of value products. And for us, we now face into a mountain of paperwork that we currently have an exemption for, specifically in Northern Ireland, understand me, but that will end whenever the negotiations conclude. And we know what that looks like through trying to run our business in Southern Ireland. We service our stores in Northern Ireland from depots in England, Scotland, Wales. We pick and pack the lorries 7 days a week to go across directly to those shops. And we know that we face really increased costs and paperwork, divergence in regulations, which is already happening. The next big divergence happens in June of this year on titanium dioxide, which means there will be less products available to customers in Northern Ireland than there will be anywhere else in the United Kingdom. And we'll be incurring more costs for those products. So it's a real challenge for us, and a real challenge which is then exacerbated by all of the other challenges that we're all well aware of that businesses are facing. So our lives are fundamentally harder to do the same thing, which is effectively we're just trying to serve customers in shops, and we've got a lot more paperwork, a lot more regulations to go through, and often dealing with issues with products not getting through due to checks at borders.
Can I just ask you, could you give us an example of the products that will be lost because of the change you just referred to, where the EU has been bringing in new rules which are not being followed by the UK?
Absolutely. Titanium dioxide, which often shows up as a colouring in products where you're trying to keep them white. So great examples of things like that would be icing on Christmas cakes, where suddenly that Christmas cake icing would no longer be able to be moved across into an EU border. So lots of products at risk, and that's the next change that comes in June. We've issues at the moment over Brazilian beef, which is not acceptable in the EU, which again we're allowed to bring in and have within products elsewhere in the UK. And it's an ever-growing range. Divergence by its nature will only go in one direction.
Okay, thank you very much. Stephen.
Chair, the significant difference was that up until the 1st of January 2021, goods could quite clearly freely flow from GB into Northern Ireland. So in its basic sense, where there was no friction until the 31st of December 2020, from the 1st of January, there was very significant friction on that border. And the challenge that posed to traders in Northern Ireland was quite profound. As business as we'd known it up until that point was completely thrown into the air, with no time, no detail, no preparation required, because the operational plan for the protocol only was agreed between the UK and the EU some 3 weeks prior to the end of the year. So it meant that those people come the 1st of January 2021 who hoped to just continue on business as usual suddenly found that was impossible. The big challenge then, and has continued throughout 2021, and I have a survey which I'll share with your secretariat for committee members, was both the preparedness and the willingness of GB suppliers to engage with the new processes that existed to move goods to Northern Ireland from GB. consistently right throughout 2021, 1 in 5 manufacturers report that their GB supplier has remained unwilling to send stuff to Northern Ireland. So they're unwilling to engage with the processes. It may be not economic for them to engage with the processes, or they just couldn't be bothered with new processes that are there. And that's caused significant problems for us.
That's because of paperwork and cost, bluntly.
Paperwork and costs. And what's got to be borne in mind is that throughout the entirety of 2021, there were no frictions for those traders in GB in terms of their supply chain, inward supply chain from the EU, because that border only became into practice in the 1st of January of this year. So we've had a whole year of what GB traders are experiencing now. But also, so 1 in 5 have that unwillingness problem. But consistently throughout 2021 as well, around about 40% of GB suppliers said that they were unprepared for those challenges. And there's nothing that was done throughout 2021 with the UK government to try to make life easier for those GB suppliers to send stuff to us. And it was being left to traders and businesses here to talk to the supplier to say to them, listen, we need you to do X, Y, and Z. We'll take it on from there, etc., etc. One of the things that's really important in terms of the agreement that the UK and the EU arrived at for its own overall relationship is that the island of Britain's centre, or the island of Britain's position as a centre of distribution for Europe, is gone now. That is a very deliberate outcome from the Brexit negotiation and the TCA that the UK and the EU agreed. And that has meant that goods that would have ordinarily been distributed from Britain to here in Northern Ireland, that just simply can't happen anymore. That includes EU goods that are sent to Britain before onward sent on to Northern Ireland. And that's been a big challenge for us. So what has happened is that our traders have made every effort to reorientate supply chains, to work with their GB suppliers where possible, to get stuff direct from markets in Europe and across the world rather than distributing via GB. And that has caused cost and complexity for businesses that have to be reflected in our final prices.
Okay, that is really helpful. Thank you. Frankie, is there anything you'd?
Just a couple of comments. I mean, I think in terms of what has changed, there are fundamental changes, particularly on the GB NI movements, as Stephen has referred to. It has to be recognised that this is all very new for businesses. It all came at them at great speed at the last minute. Preparation wasn't how you would plan these things in an ideal world, let's put it that way. And I suppose, I mean, I remember a time before 1993 single market, whenever I was starting to work in this type of space, and it wasn't actually in Northern Ireland, but for Northern Ireland businesses that came through from 1993 onwards, customs, all of those issues were not a requirement. You know, not to say nobody, there were some importers coming in from outside of the outside of the UK before then, outside the EU, but suddenly then the tap was just switched off in terms of those simplifications, and you're just bombarded with a huge amount of extra work, and you know that's obviously deal with.
Okay, that's really helpful.
Thank you very much. Paul.
Thank you very much indeed. And my question will be to Victor, Fiona and Denise, if possible, just to maybe bring it in on. And it's how much preparation was there for the change in Northern Ireland, and what support has been available? Has there been a process which business can contribute and
Hello? Hold on, what happened? Hello?
Hello, Paul.
I'm just thinking aloud here, guys, as one of the commissioners, and Jake can step in, but if we can't get to the room, feed in the room, Jake and Flo, what we could do is I could go to question 4 and ask the people who aren't in the room that question. Jake, would that be a good idea? I know that you're there.
Happy to support that tomorrow if that helps.
Okay, fine. So let's go to question 4, I think, while we sort out the Wi-Fi in the room. And sorry, because this hit my son coming back from school, I just got nagged and I realized I wasn't on mute at that time where I said, go find the iPad. Sorry, guys. So question 4, and then we can pick up with the room once they're out of the Wi-Fi issues, is this question. Although the protocol is about goods, Brexit also means new barriers to services provision, mostly north to south, as well as different treatments of VAT east to west. To what extent are these problems? And if I could start, please, with Stuart.
We're back.
Okay, so I just did. It's Tamara here. I just started asking question 4, just because there was your Wi-Fi issue, but I'm happy to hold off and then go back to you now. What would you like me to do, Chair?
Because Denise is just giving us some views.
Okay, so I'll hold off. Sorry about that, guys. Thank you.
So Paul, you're asking what help. So we had to find organisations who could help us train for what could be ahead of us. And Northern Ireland Chamber of Commerce were very helpful in this space. The Institute of Export, and let's say Chartered Accountants, that organisation. So you had to go and find where the gaps were in your knowledge and go and seek out what was out there to fill them. There's no, well, might be now, but then there was no one go-to place. So you were trying to search around.
Thank you very much indeed.
And then, sorry, Paul, what you do then is you learn and then you try and bring it back into your organisation, see what changes you need to put in place with your new knowledge, and see are your risks different than what you thought they were?
Thank you. And maybe from Fiona's perspective in relation to logistics and how that worked out in your own industry.
I think you have to be sensible when you have a private business and you have 200 staff. You have to look at the worst case scenario, and the worst case scenario for us was a hard Brexit, and that was a trade border on the island of Ireland. Our business is based in County Armagh, but we knew because we were crossing the border constantly with mixed product, it was going to be impossible to try and transport that product. And that's the same issue that they're having from the UK or mainland UK to Northern Ireland now, where it's very difficult to try and transport chilled mixed product. So we invested in Dublin very quickly. We had to. And it was extremely difficult because we didn't have the support. We had to sit in the room and say, what decisions are we going to make for our business? We Googled, we just had to see where we could find support. We went to HMRC seminars, we went to revenue seminars in Dublin, because obviously they were going to have the same issues in regard to trade. We worked with Logistics UK. We did courses with Irish exporters because we didn't know how much customs we would require. And as a small business, you don't want to throw your money into a sinkhole. We could have taken on 20 customs or even trained 20 customs employees, because there weren't 20 customs people trained out there because it's been pre-93, and that was a major difficulty. So it was very difficult to try and find that support. And we were really in a political vacuum. In June 2016, it moved scenarios and the goalposts constantly changed. So it was very difficult for us because we had to be conscious that our employees were protected and that our business was protected. And we also had the pressure from our customers. We'd have hundreds of customers moving mixed product, and it's trying to keep your customers on board because they obviously have demands from supermarkets, and they were getting questionnaires constantly to say, is your supply chain intact? Are you able to withstand any of the challenges that come about on foot of Brexit? And we just said yes, and we worked as well as we could. But because we were trying to gauge it from day to day, we certainly had the challenge of seeing where to make our financial investment. And I did feel at the time that we were, as a logistics company, that we were suddenly put out there as being able to answer all the questions and to do the customs paperwork, but that's certainly not the case. There's only a certain level of clearance customs houses there. But we had forecasted that if we did have to do customs, that we would try and engage somebody or even try to bring it in-house, which, to be fair to local producers here, that they have had to do, and they're taking it on board, because as we know, each declaration costs a certain amount of money. So if you can bring those brains in-house, you can save the money going forward, because it's obviously a very competitive industry, and supermarkets can move, and they can move the source of their products. So you have to look after your customers and service them as much as possible, because that's what we're here to do. But certainly those challenges are still there for logistics firms that are transporting goods from the UK mainland to Northern Ireland. But I just think it's very important going forward that we continue to engage with the business community, because at the end of the day, there is a wider debate, but we need to focus on the practical and operational challenges that companies are facing on a daily basis, because every challenge has a solution, and it's about finding out what that solution is and addressing it head on and putting a solution in place.
Did you find it more advantageous or easier, maybe that's the right way to put it, to either bring goods in through Dublin or export through Dublin? Now, granted, there will be a change to Dublin as from the 1st of January of this year, because it will effectively be doing exactly what we've been doing between Belfast and Arlarn and Cairnryan or whatever. I'm wondering, was that transition easier, and what is actually happening now?
Well, our company focuses on trade on the island of Ireland. So we don't actually transport out to the UK mainland or the European Union, but I'm sure everyone would have read on media how Rosslare Port has opened up, that they're going via. It was never seen as a permanent route, but now obviously there has been an increase in trade, because it's easier for us to export from the country out to mainland UK from Rosslare. Our problem was going to be if there was a trade border on the island of Ireland, but we dealt with it as best we could at that time, but the protocol has protected our customers, that they can trade openly on the island of Ireland. And I do think that there are solutions and technical solutions that will be found in the next number of years that can again assist companies and give them those opportunities that are there outside the island of Ireland.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much. Tamara, pick it up from where you left off.
Thank you, Chair. I'll re-ask the question. So the question I'm going to pose is, although the protocol is about goods, Brexit also means new barriers to services provision, mostly north to south, as well as different treatments of VAT east to west. To what extent are these problems? And I'll start with Stuart, please.
Hi, it's just a significantly increased layer of administration, particularly on VAT, and then it adds in additional cost to service the Northern Ireland market, which is frankly not big enough and not viable to withstand these costs on its own right, and so our business is being tipped on its side for 33 stores. That's the big one, and it also starts to impact how we leverage and use preferential rates for product coming in from third countries. That again plays out into ultimately will those products ultimately be available and able to move from GB to NI. So very much the VAT piece is a big area for us, and again in everything that we've seen in negotiations between GB and EU around those issues, what keeps standing out really clearly is there's a complete lack of understanding on both sides around what these things mean in a retail business.
Just before I ask the other two people I've got down for this, Stuart, has there been any appetite from government to discuss any kind of support on the VAT issue that you've had coming back from your engagement?
Yes, and I think the challenge we have is that there is it feels like there's openness almost on both sides at times in terms of discussion with both government and the EU, but we keep falling down on there's just a lack of understanding of the businesses that you're dealing with, and it goes back to that the previous question around support. We have a hugely supportive relationship with DEFRA and DERA. They're fantastic people at an individual level and go out of their way to help you, but they don't understand our business still to this day. They do not understand the reality of trying to run a retail business. And that makes it really hard for that to be more than just sentiment and words as opposed into actual practical change.
Thank you, Stuart. I'm next going to ask Frankie Devlin the same question, please.
Okay, thanks. I'll maybe try and answer the VAT question as well, because I suppose services is a bit broader, but VAT is the one that I actually know something about. So, yeah, I suppose in a Northern Ireland context, the big VAT issue has been on second-hand goods, second-hand margin scheme for cars, massive issue. Probably one of those that nobody really thought about, and suddenly there was a very significant issue on the table for our Northern Ireland car dealers in particular. We do believe that there is now a solution in the offing for that, and HMRC, with we believe the consent of the EU, are going to put in place a new procedure, an export refund scheme, which effectively gets you back to a margin scheme that works for our businesses here. It's a little bit clunky in terms of how you get to it, but you more or less get back to the same position as you would have been in. So it means dealers can source their second-hand car pool from Great Britain, which is where they get most of their cars from. In terms of the wider VAT piece, I suppose what I would say is VAT is a very complicated tax. I mean, I work in this area, it is very complicated, and Brexit and the protocol has made it more complicated. So it's another thing which businesses have had to deal with in terms of putting in place new systems, trying to understand whether they're supplying goods or services. And obviously the protocol applies to goods, to which the EU VAT rules apply. Services, the protocol doesn't apply to it, so you're applying UK VAT rules. So there's a bit of a learning that needs to ongoing in relation to that. But I would say that overall, my own view would be that the VAT piece has not been as significant by any means compared to the customs, but I stand corrected. But in terms of maybe the wider service piece, I think the only other comment I would have, and it's not something which we as a firm and KPMG have had a problem with, but I suppose the whole mutual recognition of professional qualifications across the island of Ireland in terms of the common travel area. So there are particular sectors that are more impacted than others. And again, I think we probably ultimately need to get to some sort of bilateral agreement between the UK and the EU, and Ireland obviously needs to play a big part in that in terms of making sure that there is that mutual recognition, reciprocal recognition of professional qualifications across the island of Ireland and beyond, so that our professionals can continue to work in Northern Ireland, in the Republic of Ireland, in the rest of the UK, and as they did before. So I think that is something which still needs some further work.
Thank you. And then I have down Stephen to ask the same question to you, please, as my last person before I hand back to the chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Tamara. What I would say is that the Northern Ireland Protocol is a not insignificant, but still a small set of rules that ensure that goods can continue to travel north and south on the island of Ireland without the need for physical infrastructure. What it doesn't mean, which is often misunderstood and is repeated ad infinitum by many commentators, is that we're in the single market. We're not. Brexit has meant that the all-island economy, for that matter, has essentially been set back to 1993, but a little bit added in there in terms of the free movement of goods. The markets, the all-island economy has diverged quite significantly because of Brexit, and that has an impact right across the Northern Ireland economy. I met recently with an insurance business who were an all island business, who had to sell their southern part of their business and concentrate purely on the north, because it was just impossible for them post Brexit to actually operate that business as one unit. If this commission's informed and intelligent, but it's important that in its report that it makes it clear we're not actually in the single market, and that is damaging to us. It's damaging if you're in services, but it's also damaging in parts of manufacturing where services come alongside the actual goods that you produce as well.
Thank you. So Stephen, just before I hand back to Chair, just picking up on that last point, then is the ambition that it does become more integrated with the single market for that opportunity for business across the island of Ireland to develop, to strengthen? Because what I'm hearing from what you just said sounds like that's a diminishing of your business opportunities without that happening.
It is. I can speak only really for manufacturers, but take for instance some of our equipment manufacturers. We dominate the world in quarrying engineering equipment. Part of the business relationship that supplier here in Northern Ireland, the manufacturer, has with its customer in the EU, for instance, is the goods, the physical goods themselves, but the rest of it's around commissioning that piece of machinery, services alongside it in terms of repair or other functions, and that can't fully operate because we're not in the single market. That can't fully operate because the protocol's only about avoiding a border on the island of Ireland and not actually about Northern Ireland being in the single market itself.
Those have been really helpful answers to questions. I've learned a lot from that, and that's very important information for us to carry forward with the Commission. I hand back to the Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Claire.
Thank you very much. It can be difficult, I think, to get your head around the governance of all of this. So I wanted to ask which institutions, the EU, the UK, or the Northern Ireland Executive, have been responsible for what in terms of designing and implementing the protocol, and have they been open to input from your sectors? And if I could go to you, Denise, first.
Yes, I would have said DAERA, certainly very, very engaging, and the Northern Ireland Office. And we would have also worked with DEFRA, HMRC, Irish Revenue, Foreign Affairs in the South. So would have found very, very, very engaging, and an awful lot of interaction, trying to find solutions, and trying to find answers for us, pre-Brexit and post-Brexit.
You've had to go round the doors a bit then, by the sounds of things, and
well, no more than when I was explaining earlier on, when you were trying to train yourself, it was just, you were just gathering information. So it was whatever it took, but certainly a very open door on the other side from those individual bodies, and very engaging.
Fiona, did you find the same thing about the different responsibilities and how you were able to, the different institutions and how you've been able to engage with them?
I found the likes of Logistics UK, and I'd met Stephen previously, and we went to various seminars. So we were certainly given a platform that we could voice our concerns. But at the end of the day, everything was changing so quickly over the last number of years, and it was very difficult to know what to do. So when you're in a private business, you need to make your own decisions. It's very difficult for any institution to give you clear advice when it is constantly changing. And at the end of the day, the decisions were going to be made at a political level. And ultimately what happened is time ran out. Businesses weren't given the opportunity to say, this is going to be the difficulty. We've been wading through all those problems now, and that's the difficulty that's even arisen in Larne, where there's operational challenges there. So even though the decision was made at a political level, the operational challenges were not considered, because ultimately we are the people working on the ground. We're facing those challenges every day. And I felt like we still had to move on, but certainly we did knock on doors. We went out, and we have to as a business, and we appreciate that we have to do that. We went to the seminars, and as I said, we were given the opportunity to voice, but it wasn't really the time or the place to try and engage, because That time has only come in the last 12 months where we can see what the issues are. And it's now an opportunity for businesses to give those practical solutions. And it's an opportunity for those at a political level to listen to businesses and find out what the issues are, and to work with the likes of KPMG or Frankie that see what the services are, what the tax implications are, because at the end of the day, we're concerned about the profit of our business, because that ultimately will benefit employment and our staff and our business and the Northern Irish economy.
Victor, can I ask you that same question about the implementation, particularly who you've most had to deal with, and how has that been?
Yes, thanks, Claire, and sorry for losing connection earlier on, and I just heard the half of Paul's question, but I'll take your question first, Claire. Maybe want to mention something about Paul's question as well. But Claire, yeah, DAERA have been trying to find solutions. We've also engaged with the EU negotiating team. We've seen a huge shift in the EU negotiations team's attitude, but we haven't seen very little movement. And I will say that in the early days, it was UK have left, don't come to us with your problems. To at the very last meeting with Marcus Stefanich was, we're trying to have Northern Ireland in the best of both worlds. But in many instances, we feel that we are left in no man's land. And while DAERA and some of the chief vets in DAERA, and I could mention some of them by name, have been very helpful, they have come up against immovable problems. And to go back maybe a little bit to Paul's question on, were we prepared for this? We certainly were not prepared for this. As a farming community, we had a lot of our farmers had sheep purchased in September. Nobody ever told them. The norm was that they kept them to April till they were a year old and then tested them for MV and then brought them into Northern Ireland. They couldn't bring them in before the 1st of January because they weren't a year old to get that test done. Then all of a sudden the scrapie rules changed. We had no idea that the seeds we needed for our fields, which normally came from the GB seed houses, all of a sudden would have huge issues in trying to get them in here. It's okay if you're taking one of the big consignments, but we have less varieties. We can't get small varieties. In fact, some of the seed houses have refused to deal with us completely. Seed potatoes is just a complete no-no. And even to this day, the EU has not given anything there. So which institutions did we deal with? We dealt with all the institutions we could. We knocked on all doors. We got listened to. Sometimes we felt we were getting tea and sympathy and no action. But DAERA were doing their best in a difficult situation. But we are left that we have huge problems. Some trade flows have stopped completely. The movement of livestock to GB, which was our sales for our pedigree sales, people are unprepared to take the risk of not getting them sold and then not getting them back for 6 months. Our plant protection products, our EU regulation authorization doesn't cover us in Northern Ireland, nor does the UK authorization. Many of these products were too small a marketplace for a chemical company to authorize for Northern Ireland only. So we are having some huge problems there in our supply chain. So like I did highlight the positives in my first response, but it's a bit like a game of football, and you're winning in one half and you're losing in the other. So we have things out there. We met the EU Commission the last time they were over on farm, and they did get an understanding of the problems we have, but we really can't understand why, if you're importing a bit of seed to put in your own field in Northern Ireland, why it's any risk to the EU single market. And there needs to be some flexibility built into the system going forward. So thank you, Claire. I hope that answered some of your questions.
Stephen, have you anything to add to that, just about navigating it and the impact on business?
I think it's important to put on the record first. I mean, the willingness and the ability of civil servants across departments in Northern Ireland and in Whitehall, and at times in the EU, to be supportive has been incredible, particularly in the first number of months of 2021. HMRC, Cabinet Office, now FCDO, etc., etc. They They wanted to know what the issues were, and they wanted to solve them and solve them quickly. So it's important to put that on record. But the fundamental challenge here is that this is a treaty arrangement between two sovereigns, the European Union and the UK. It's not our job to do the negotiation, and it's not our job to do the agreement. If it was, we'd have had sorted months ago, clearly. But it is our job. It is our job to make sure that those people who are making those decisions are informed. It is our job to make sure that they understand the practicalities of what they're proposing. And we've done that quite rigorously over the last year. We've produced papers, we've responded to the EU's non-papers, provided evidence, etc., etc., etc. And we've brought both sides of the specialised committee, the UK negotiators and the EU negotiators, here to Northern Ireland to see for themselves, for the first time on some occasions, what the practicalities actually are. Because it's all well and good looking at things in spreadsheets or in presentations or in reports, but actually seeing it in real life and understanding, as Fiona and others have said, the real life business implications of that is much more powerful than anything else.
Thanks, Millie. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Claire. Alison, are you there?
Yes, I am. Hello. So even before the protocol was implemented, there was political opposition and ongoing discussions about the between the UK and EU on both how it be implemented and potentially major changes. I can only imagine this caused a sense of instability or uncertainty. So how did that impact businesses' ability to plan and operate? So I'll go to Stuart first, if I can.
I guess in two ways. One, as a business, you can't wait. It's that simple. And that means, in sort of real life examples in Iceland, that means delisting products and taking them off shelf, because you have to assume that there is not going to be an agreement on them, and we make those decisions months and months and months in advance, and so you've no choice but to err on the side of sort of legal caution, and that what that means is sort of punitive impact on Northern Ireland customers. So we have to make decisions. We can't wait. But even now, in the negotiations that are ongoing, whilst the EU will have clear positions that are being negotiated against, because of the nature of negotiations, and I understand this and appreciate it, the UK position is often quite vague, intentionally so. It's very hard to do anything with that as a business, in terms of how do you react or feed into that vagueness, and how do you plan for what it, so we're all left in limbo, and it just means that in terms of making long-term decisions for Northern Ireland, you can't and you wouldn't.
Yeah, you're kind of going with the worst case scenario to be on the
you
safe
have to
side, I guess.
absolutely.
Yeah, I can imagine. Thank you. Can I go to Denise now, please?
I would say one of the aspects is, if you have spent the last few years working to protect your business from all the risks because you don't know what's going to happen, it means you're not doing anything else from a strategic point of view. I would also say that businesses react to certainty, no matter what it is, and they will work accordingly. And when you have uncertain pieces, it's very difficult, and it does kind of paralyze businesses. So I suppose certainty is what we need. That would be this.
I can see it just becomes a massive distraction from trying to get on with doing your jobs. And just last, can I go to Frankie, please?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously instability, uncertainty, political instability, none of that is helpful for business investment decisions. As all others have said, you make those decisions over, you don't decide to do something next month. You look forward. Like in our business, we'll think, okay, what's the plan over the next 5 years? So it's a 2, 3, 5 year look forward. And if somewhere is in uncertain, instability, the rules are unclear, will those rules still apply in a number of years' time? That's not helpful for investment decisions. I mean, we in our own business here, we decided to make a very substantial investment about 12 months ago with some assistance from Invest NI. So we leased an additional floor upstairs with a view to employing an additional 200 people in a particular cybersecurity data analytics type of business, which is completely unique for us. So again, that's a risk for our business in this particular region. But again, we took the decision because we can't wait. We can't wait for these things to get sorted out, and all businesses are the same. They need to make that decision. So I suppose as an advisor, my one concern is, are we missing the boat here? Are we missing the opportunity to have a protocol that gives us something unique? Because investors don't hang around and wait for us to sort these issues out.
Yeah, I can quite imagine how difficult this has been for years now, and potentially many more to come. Thank you all for your answers. I'll hand back to the chair.
Thank you, Alison. Charles, we'll go to you.
Thanks. We've learned quite a bit today about the challenges and the responses of Northern Ireland businesses in response to the implementation of the protocol. And I think we're all, tremendously impressed by the resilience and the responses that we've heard about today. It seems that business has emerged as a trusted player in the discussions about the future of the protocol. I wonder if you could talk a bit about how this has happened, because we've heard a little bit about the acrimony and perhaps distrust between other parties who are in this process. And in this, I'd like to pass the question to Fiona, to Stephen, and then Victor. Please, Fiona.
Well, again, reiterating what I spoke about earlier, we're on the ground. We see the practical implications. We work for the food industry throughout Northern Ireland and even throughout the island of Ireland, and we've seen the operational impacts and the demands that's been put on our customers. And when our customers are under pressure like that, obviously there's going to be pressure on us as a business. But we are the soldiers on the ground that are able to report back as to what the difficulties are. We don't have a political agenda. Our loyalty is to our business, our loyalty is to our staff, and that's where our focus is. So at the end of the day, we want to see the protocol work for the benefit of business and industry in Northern Ireland. We don't have any other agenda. We want to retain the unfettered access to the UK mainland and to the EU for the benefit of the economy. And it's the business that can report back to politicians like the opportunity we're given here today. And we can work very well together to try and find those solutions, because there are solutions that can be surmounted. And those issues that we are seeing in regard to the trade between mainland UK and Northern Ireland are surmountable. And I think it is encouraging that businesses are given the opportunity to be given that platform to express the issues that are there. And I think moving forward that they should listen, that the opportunity should continue, and a solution will be found in that way.
Thank you. Stephen, can I pass the same question to you?
Yeah, those MPs in the room will know this more than most, but there's a frankness about people from Ulster that travels with us. It's either
really?
It's either one of our attractions or frustrations.
Good trade.
And we have been relentlessly honest about the choices that have been made and the consequences of those choices that have been made throughout this entire process from 2016 till today. And we back that up with evidence. We back that up with real life experience, with data, with case study. And it's a frustration as someone sitting here in Northern Ireland who represents only Northern Ireland that perhaps at times some of my colleagues, for instance, in business groups and elsewhere in the UK have not been as relentlessly honest around this. I think we would be, as a country, in a much better place if we were able to speak frankly about these things and and recognise that actually no one's got an axe to bear here. We're just trying to do what's right for the people that we all represent. From our perspective, it is about ensuring that the voice is heard. Just at the point of the Brexit process, where things were getting really interesting, our executive closed down for 3 years. So we had no voice at that point in time. So we were left with no alternative but to step up and provide a voice and provide that honesty. And we've continued to do that, and we will continue to do that throughout the period ahead. As Fiona says, a lot of these problems are surmountable. A lot of these problems our businesses have already navigated. A lot of these problems that with a bit of goodwill and pragmatism from both the UK and the EU, we would position ourselves in a much better place than we are today. But it's going to take that honest conversation. And it's because of that the only people in Northern Ireland that are trusted on this issue is the business community. 60% of people that are polled. That's no offence to our political friends in the room.
We're at 1% net favourability. Just the record.
1% is better than 0%. The UK government itself has only got a 4% positive rating with the people in Northern Ireland on this matter. So that's a responsibility that we hold dearly, because it means that that people recognise that we are being honest. We're recognising the consequences, and we have a responsibility to ensure that we continue to bring and speak truth to power on these things.
Thank you. And Victor, I wonder if you can add to this from your perspective.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, look, I think we as a business community find ourselves in a fortunate position. Sovereignty issues don't affect us. We have to leave those at the door. One of my comments is that there's no such thing as an orange cow or a green cow in Northern Ireland. We as the Ulster Farmers Union represent all cows, and so we have that. We're not fortunate, and position that political interference doesn't concern us at all. So that helps us maybe to be trusted. We may have those views personally, but when we represent our industry, we have to look at the problems on the ground. Look, we always have said from the start, we want trade east-west, north-south to continue unfettered. And that's what we were promised. But unfortunately, we are ended up in many instances in no man's land. I do think that there is solutions, workable solutions. But for those workable solutions to come to the fore, there'll have to be flexibilities. And the EU will have to accept things on that Irish Sea border that they wouldn't on any of their other borders. And the UK are going to have to accept things that they are uncomfortable with as well. We can't be left in a position in the business community in Northern Ireland when we're both second-class UK citizens and second-class EU citizens. That is an unacceptable place to arrive at. We as a business community are unashamed of the fact is that we want to land in this sweet spot where we have the best of both worlds. And I think because of the size of Northern Ireland and our unfortunate history, that should be achievable. And we are seeing a softening of language now. What we need is that softening of actions to allow us to be in that spot. And I don't think it will be any great risk to either the market in the UK or indeed the market in the EU. When stuff come to a farm in Northern Ireland, whether it's a tractor part or a seed to be sown in a field in Northern Ireland, that should have no risk to the EU single market, and it needs to be accepted as that. So thanks for that. Hope that's helpful.
Thanks. I think that what we pick up from this is that the importance of being clear and being focused both on the building and the supporting and maintenance of existing business has been a key part of the business response to these issues. Back to you.
Thank you, Charles. Philip.
Thanks very much, Chair. If I could start with yourself, Stuart, to what extent Could the proposals put forward last year by the UK and EU ease some of the key issues that you've faced? And how much do you think a veterinary agreement, if one could be reached, would help in reducing checks on food and drink products coming in either direction?
I think the sentiment is great, but the practical reality in terms of what is still the very low level of actual detail that's been shared says there would be no benefit and no difference whatsoever. The best way to sum that up is that it is still on the table in some shape or form from both sides. This concept of having a label on individual products, with this idea of saying something along the lines of only for sale and consumption in Northern Ireland, which is ludicrous from a risk point of view, on one hand, but ludicrous in the sense of what that actually means is you would be asking every retailer, every brand to double their SKU list and create a completely additional separate list of products with this slightly different label, specifically in our case for 33 shops versus the other 967 shops. And that's the practical reality of a throwaway line and a set of proposals on both sides around individual labelling for Northern Ireland. So the sentiment's great, and if it could be delivered in a way that recognises both the reality of the risk to the single market, as has already been well outlined, and the reality for the businesses and the supply chains it's being imposed on, then it's achievable, but not in how it's being outlined at the moment.
And what about if it was a veterinary agreement?
Again, it comes down to the practical reality of that. What does that actually mean? The proposals we've seen so far, the level of detail when you cut into it, it wouldn't actually, it wouldn't change things.
Hello, there's a bit of background feedback there, but I think I heard my name mentioned. Yeah.
Taken in vain. So just to repeat, to what extent do you think some of the proposals mentioned last autumn would improve things, and to what extent you think if a veterinary agreement could be reached, that would reduce food and drink checks?
Yes, the veterinary agreement, if that could be reached, I think would be very important and advantageous to us. And there will have to be some flexibilities there, but if there could be some flexibilities built in that veterinary agreement put in place, that would go a large way to solving some of our problems. And some of the things that were announced in autumn would help. But we need these principles in place. It's not just about taking every item as it comes, because as there's every little bit of divergence, we come up with another problem. So we need to get principles in place that will last.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned divergence. We've heard that a lot today about not looking for a solution for day one, but something that will be sustainable as divergence inevitably moves forward. If I could come to yourself, Denise.
Yeah, I think continuing on from that idea, divergence is a problem looking forward. It's a problem for Northern Ireland manufacturing in the food sector. With divergence, you've two different standards. You always have to produce the highest standard. That means additional costs. So that covers, say, the EU and the GB market. But then if you take it further afield into free trade agreements, and if you watch standards diverge there, Northern Ireland dairy represents 60% of the UK dairy exports. So significant impact here if we end up watching divergence in new UK free trade agreements, direct impact on Northern Ireland.
And a veterinary agreement?
For us, it's not. I appreciate what Victor said is absolutely spot on. It's not. It doesn't hurt us today as much to the same extent. We're more concerned about the future of divergence. Yeah.
And Fiona, lastly yourself.
Well, I have very little to add to that. Yes, Obviously, we would, alignment with the EU would be the ultimate goal, but that's not going to happen. So we do need to find a solution for logistics firms coming from mainland UK to Northern Ireland. It's very cumbersome because it's very cumbersome for their customers. So we need to find a solution that is there. And it has been discussed with the Department of Agriculture that there are ways to surmount these challenges that are there. You know, technology has developed over the last 20 odd years, and it is something that needs to be studied in more detail and given greater credence for, because the power is not there within the department to try and cover all those checks. And there has to be a solution, and there has to be a level of trust there. And I think they have spoken about trusted trader schemes. And in order for industry and food production and farming to expand and to be able to develop on foot of the opportunities that are here, and I repeat again, the unfettered access to those EU markets and to world markets is so important. So we do need to find a solution for around those veterinary issues.
Stephen, I just wondered before I finish if you wanted to add, because you do mention you manufacture chicken wings as well as airplane wings, whether you wanted to add anything on either the suggestions put forward or a veterinary.
The thing that strikes me, Philippa, is that why are we worrying about this now in some respects? So we're in the middle of a war in Europe, which is going to have devastating impacts on supply chains. We're in the middle of a cost of living crisis. There's likely to be challenges with food supply in Western Europe with the result of what's going on. And we have the political problem with regards to the checks taking place between Scotland and England and Northern Ireland. And this is on the basis of some notional time in the future when the UK will actually diverge at that point. But the UK has bought itself a huge big bag of sovereignty with Brexit that it wants to use for the benefit of the nation. Well, surely now more than ever, in the middle of a war, in the middle of a cost of living crisis with a political drama unfolding in Northern Ireland, surely now is the time to use that sovereignty for the benefit of the nation. So for us, it would be certainly, well, do an agreement now, even if it will last for a period of 3.5 years. Take the seed potato issue that was mentioned earlier. We can get a new supply of seed potatoes here on the island of Ireland. It's going to take 3 years for that to be of a sustainable level for the supply that we have here. So let's do a deal for 3 years. Let's get through the current crisis. Please God, this conflict in Ukraine doesn't last more than 3 more minutes, never mind that period in time. But we've got to assume that life's going to be more difficult in the years ahead rather than easier. So let's use that sovereignty that we've had, park some of these issues by doing a sensible deal around SPS and veterinary and agriculture now, decompress the politics in Northern Ireland, and let's all move on in a much better way.
Thank you very much. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Alan.
Yeah, thank you very much, Peter, and thank you to all our guests. I want to, I guess, continue Philippa's line of questioning and just ask, what solutions does Northern Irish business have to suggest for improving the operation of the protocol? I guess sort of, things that are, high on your list of priorities, without being so worried about exactly what the details of the political constraints are. So in a sense, what would you do, but within the context of the protocol, to make things better and soon? Let me start perhaps with Stephen.
Alan, thanks for the question. Rather than answering it in detail, what I would say is what we've actually done. So I mentioned earlier that in the absence of an executive, the business community had no choice and had no voice, so no choice, and we stepped into this space. We've continued that process, and we've a group now that represents probably about 85% of the entire business population in Northern Ireland. We've engaged with UK and the EU and US and elsewhere. We've looked at the propositions both in the UK's command paper and the non-papers that the EU has published, and we've offered a critique of those and added into that some of our own suggestions of things that both sides could agree. but also things that business can do to overcome some of the problems that are identified. If I give a practical example of where business could help here, rightly, Southern European states have an issue with a thing called citrus black spot. They don't like the prospect that the UK would bring citrus fruit from South America or elsewhere, and this disease could arrive on European shores and then through Northern Ireland potentially work its way into the southern citrus growing states in the EU. And they also don't really trust the UK government to deliver on its behalf in that border that it's delegated to the UK to deliver in Northern Ireland. So our retailers could go, well, listen, we'll only buy European citrus. Would you be happy with that? Or listen, we can buy this other citrus, but we'll put it through the port of Dublin rather than the ports in Northern Ireland, where it's EU officials that are doing those checks. We volunteer to have checks on the items that you're most concerned about, but in return we want something else, which is a huge reduction in some of the formalities that are going. But let's just concentrate on the things that you're actually really worried about. We will share with the Secretariat of the Commission the papers that we've submitted to UK and EU, where there's a list of practical things that business can do and the things that business can't do that we need the UK and EU to agree.
Thank you. That'd be a very useful list to see. Frankie, do you have views about this?
Yes, thanks. I suppose just to add to what Stephen said, and again, I would be involved in the same business group. So again, within the papers that we have sent to both the UK teams and the EU teams, we did set out what we felt were some practical solutions to some of the problems. So that paper was sent to them after the UK command paper and just before the EU issued their non-papers. So I suppose we were waiting with, in anticipation, I suppose, of the EU non-papers coming back, because again, we knew that they had discussed it with us and we were hoping for a positive response on many of the issues. And the area that I would know most would be the customs issues, which obviously is causing problems, and trying to set out to them, let's focus on the risk to the single market. So can we have a significant reduction in paperwork, the data fields that need to be required, the requirement to do supplementary declarations for goods moving from Great Britain into Northern Ireland, particularly where Northern Ireland is the end destination, and come up with something which is a bit more bespoke for that GB Northern Ireland sea border, which is unique. And again, we were trying to get the message across that although we recognize that the protocol needs to be implemented and operated and the single market needs to be protected, we believe there are other creative ways to look at that. So again, we feel that the sides are moving closer together, the EU and the UK side. We do believe there is movement in relation to some of those points, particularly on the customs. We don't necessarily think it's going to be all that we have asked for, but again, it's going to be a compromise position, and let's get it to a better position than it is at the moment. So I think that's probably where I would leave it.
Okay, thank you very much. Denise.
Yes, so for the dairy sector, the Northern Ireland Protocol works very well. There's no doubt about it. We can move milk freely up and down the country, and it has protected our business hugely. There's no doubt about it. When you look forward, however, if you bring milk from the south to the north and process it together, because you can't separate it once you've mixed it, under the UK free trade agreements, that product has got UK origin on it. However, if you bring northern milk south and process it together, it doesn't have EU origin. So the Ireland and Northern Ireland Protocol hasn't addressed that part for us. And as Victor said earlier on, we don't want Northern Ireland products to become the secondary class, in the future arrangements.
Yeah, indeed. Oh, that's very nice and concrete. Fiona, perhaps you have some views?
I think every business in Northern Ireland will outline a challenge that they've had in the last number of years and how they could try and improve their protocol. From our perspective and from a perspective of food producers, it's very important that the SPS movement in between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland continues. The question of clarity and certainty comes up again and again when we discuss the protocol. And the protocol is before the Assembly again in 2024. And again, that creates a level of uncertainty for business, and any business person out there, whether it's foreign investment or whether it's local investment, it's very difficult to make those financial jumps when you don't know what the future holds. But just referring to what Stephen said in regard to issues, we do need to look at what's happening today. We have surmised for the last 6 years, but now we have a certain roadmap there. And I think it's very important that we move forward on the difficulties that are here at the current time, because the world is changing from day to day, and we need to look at what we can provide mainland UK, Northern Ireland, and indeed the Republic of Ireland, and see how we can work together for the benefit and for the economic benefit of Northern Ireland.
Thank you. May I have a tiny supplementary, Peter, stemming from what Fiona's just said. Fiona, are you suggesting that from your point of view, and perhaps more generally among the business community, these periodic since reviews of the protocol are unhelpful, and you'd rather see something that was, as it were, permanent until there was positive action to withdraw, or with much longer review periods?
Absolutely, and because every business there, when you're making a financial decision, when any of us here go for a mortgage, it's a 5 to 15-year mortgage, and it's very hard to go to your financial institutions when there is a risk ahead. So if we can say this is the position for our business, it's obviously easier to get investment. And if anyone is going to invest in a business, it's very hard to go before a financial institution seeking that. I also wanted to make the point, sorry, just when I have the opportunity to do so, that in regards to the protocol, even though there has been positives for Northern Ireland, we do have, on the flip side, there's the scarcity of labour. And I think we need to also look at how we can allow labour into the country. In Republic of Ireland, it's far easier to get visas for South African drivers to come into the Republic of Ireland, but the obstacle and barriers that you have trying to get those visas for drivers that wish to come in to Northern Ireland is unbelievable. That it's so different. It's such a divergence when it's only basically down the road. So we need to see how we can get labour in from non-EU countries, and that again would benefit Northern Ireland going forward, because we are the local producer. You know, we've so many producers here and manufacturers here, and this is where the positives are, and this is where we can move forward as an economy.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me hand back to Peter.
Stephen.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. There have been some suggestions that Northern Ireland can have the best of both worlds, or perhaps rather better said, is a foot in both camps in terms of access to both the EU and GB markets. But some others fear the uncertainty and the complexity of this. So to what extent do you feel that Northern Ireland is now an increasingly attractive place for investment? And what needs to happen to make that a reality? I'll go to ask Frankie, Stephen, and then Stuart in turn. So Frankie, over to you first.
Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, I suppose, I mean, from my own firm's point of view, KPMG, we've an office in Belfast here. We've got 3 offices down south, obviously, and that's sort of part of our Irish partnership. We've obviously got offices elsewhere across the UK and beyond, but again, our focus is on the island of Ireland. So whenever we saw the protocol, I think as business advisors, we have to have a glass half full. As a firm, we were actually not for Brexit, let's put it that way. We didn't see the benefits of it, but it came, we got the protocol, and therefore we're trying to look at the positives and the opportunities. And certainly we could see where the benefits could be. They were never going to be immediate because we obviously had to go through all of the process of understanding what it meant and implementing it and all the procedures that go with that. But we certainly could see the uniqueness of our position and that unique selling point, because obviously the access to the EU market and the unfettered access to the GB market. And therefore, initially in the early days, we were having conversations with businesses in the South, businesses across the EU within our own network. And they were saying likewise, yeah, we wish we could have something like that. Now again, the GBNI bit complicated it and all of the complications there, but we certainly were having conversations around, particularly if you wanted unfettered access into the GB market. And a point that was mentioned earlier, it's only halfway there at the minute. If we had that qualifying Northern Ireland goods definition, which basically means that in order to get the unfettered access, you have to have an establishment in Northern Ireland. So it basically pushes businesses who are down south or somewhere in the EU or elsewhere to actually set up here. So that was an obvious conversation we were having with some businesses, and they were going, yeah, well, whenever that definition comes in and we are required to set up an establishment in Northern Ireland, if we don't already have one, or expand our footprint there, that's certainly a conversation we will have to have. But I think, Stephen, and again, I hope we haven't missed the opportunity of doing that. But time is rolling on and investment decisions are being made elsewhere and people are moving elsewhere.
Just as a very quick supplementary to that, Frankie, to what extent is the current budgetary uncertainty for Invest Northern Ireland a complication in all of this?
Yeah, I mean, it's not helpful in terms of that foreign direct investment. Absolutely, it doesn't help. Because again, I mean, it doesn't, we're such a small place, 1.9 million people, all of that, it doesn't take an awful lot of foreign direct investment here to make a really significant impact. We don't need to replicate what we've done down south. And, the businesses that we've attracted down south, it's unbelievable. We just have to attract a very small fraction of that. But again, the budgetary thing with InvestNI, I don't know the full details of it, but again, it's unhelpful because again, InvestNI have done a great job in certain cases to bring a certain type of business here. Again, we would like to go beyond what they have been doing in terms of, which is in many ways the service sector and businesses like that Stephen represents in terms of manufacturing. So those were the sort of conversations we were having with manufacturing businesses who are manufacturing goods, and therefore they need to have that unfettered access by setting up in Northern Ireland. So hopefully not a missed opportunity. Sure.
I'll turn to my namesake, Stephen. Perhaps Stephen, in response, you could maybe reflect on some of the sectors that are particularly open to this, such as the medicines piece.
Sure. So a direct response to do we have the best of both worlds? The answer to that's no. But we also don't have the worst of all worlds. And that's the significant thing. And Northern Ireland as a state is in its 101st year. And for the first time in those 101 years, we have an opportunity that's unique in terms of an economic proposition that we can take to the world. The challenge for investors is that they're getting a schizophrenic message from Northern Ireland. One piece that would read sometimes from the same commentators or politicians is that we're going to hell in a handcart, and then in the same people, this is a brilliant place to come and invest. We had just across the road, we have an investment event just today. So we need to get over ourselves with some of the things that we're saying. What we've discovered since the first of last year, despite all the political difficulties that's going on, is that our investment agency has its strongest ever prospect book. We've had the single biggest investment in jobs announced by a Northern Ireland business in the pharmaceutical industry, 1,800 jobs, 1,000 of those here in Northern Ireland, where previously, as part of their no-deal planning, those jobs were all exiting Northern Ireland. Those new jobs were exiting Northern And we've had the single biggest investment in our production capability announced since John DeLorean came here in the 1980s. Now, we hope that that investment's a bit more successful, but it's in the tin can business, so we probably have learned our lessons from that time. But the big benefit for Northern Ireland from that economic proposition that we've been given is in manufacturing. And our members are exploiting that. Our manufacturers who export say they're having the time of their lives, frankly. And we've already had manufacturing investments announced, despite all the problems last year. The second opportunity is in distribution. We've heard some of that from Fiona, and also that import substitution. So we have many particularly small food producers who were never able to provide or get listed by UK retailers who are now supplying UK retailers here in Northern Ireland, but also on the island of Ireland. So those opportunities absolutely exist for us. And when you look at where's the evidence to show that, our export sales to Ireland are up 60% in the year, whereas export sales from the UK to the EU are down 16%. If ever there was evidence that business is responding to the opportunity that's there, regardless of the politics and everything else that's around that, it is where the capital is flowing. And that's an opportunity, as Frankie says, that we need to grasp and hopefully we don't lose.
And just a Stuart as well.
From a retailer perspective, it's not an attractive investment. It's the opposite. It is a market that will end up with its own unique set of complexities that make it more expensive to serve, and it's too small to justify those costs. The way I would characterize it is, as hard as it is for us as a business to service the south of Ireland, Southern Ireland, at least we have the knowledge that in servicing Southern Ireland, we are fully set up to service actually and sell products into the wider EU market. Northern Ireland won't be like that. It will be uniquely complex, maybe not as complex as elsewhere, but uniquely complex for a market of that size. So it just isn't. And whilst that's not great for us, the people who ultimately suffer are Northern Ireland consumers.
Thank you, Stephen. We're going to draw the session to a close in a minute, and I'd just like finally to give each of you an opportunity to give us your top ask that you would make of the UK and EU sides as they try to close their negotiations. Be as brief as you like, starting with Frankie.
Okay. I think, if for our politicians and other people of influence and locally, across the UK and the EU, I think we need to reach a conclusion on this matter. It's been going on for too long. Stephen referenced the stuff that's going on in Ukraine and the rest of the world, and this stuff can be sorted. It's technical, it's complicated, but with goodwill on all sides, we can get there with some compromise. And we really do need to move on, because we need certainty and stability so that the businesses can grow and invest and give opportunities to our young people, so that our young people don't keep leaving and going somewhere else for work because they're not interested in this stuff. They're interested in having a job, getting on with life. So I think, yes, there are challenges, as Stuart mentioned, in terms of certain businesses in retail who are sourcing from Great Britain. So if we can greatly simplify that, that would be brilliant. And then in terms of our exporters, there is obviously a unique selling point if we can agree as a local economy and politically, if we can agree that we can sell this place. And I think that's how Northern Ireland could become successful, is by doing that, in terms of increasing investment, foreign direct investment, and local companies just saying, yeah, we're confident. Banks are confident to lend to local companies, and they grow and expand, and that's how businesses do it. So,
Thank you. So speed and certainty above all. Please.
First of all, the Northern Ireland Protocol works. What we'd say is from the EU side that Northern Ireland products going into processing in the EU would have EU origin. And then, which we've mentioned already, divergence. So whatever the solution is, can't be just for today. We have to look at the risk of divergence going forward for Northern Ireland manufacturing.
Victor, yours.
Yes, thank you. Look, just warm words. Let's get these warm words into warm actions and let Northern Ireland thrive, because I think we are on the cusp of a very sweet spot. I think with those flexibilities that we talked about, that we can get there. In fact, just a meeting with M&S, one of our supermarkets, just a couple of weeks ago, they saw Northern Ireland as a place to do more business with, not less, because if they manufacture it here, they can go into the ROI, they can go into the home market here, they can go into the UK market, and they can go into the rest of the Europe. That is the sweet spot, the bit that we want to arrive in. So please allow us that flexibilities as you go forward and get the warm words, that the softening tones of the EU translated into actions. And I totally agree. We need them in principles, so that not every month or two we come up with another problem, because we need to get principles set that allow us to continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart.
I think it's really simple. I think both sides need to put the people of Northern Ireland front and centre of the negotiations, and they never do. And it's not there in any of these discussions, that truth test of what does this mean for the people of Northern Ireland at the end of this. And if that was the case on both sides, I think we'd see a really different and much quicker set of results.
I think success for Northern Ireland is having that unfettered access to mainland UK and to Europe, without having the cumbersome roadblocks that we see for produce moving from mainland GB to Northern Ireland. And I think it's very important that that is said again and again. We also, I think, should recognise the local producers that are in Northern Ireland, and small businesses, local producers need to be incentivised. It needs to be recognised the costs that companies and smaller producers are facing day to day, the energy costs, the small cost that's been put there. So smaller producers have to be incentivised, because we have to create an industry here. We can't always rely on foreign industry, and sometimes it's looked as if that's the glass ceiling to get foreign direct investment here. But let's look at what's on our doorstep and incentivise those small businesses and encourage and protect those small businesses that are here. So I think there is an opportunity here to maybe look at our corporation tax rates, and I think politicians truly have to look at decisions that are made on a political level and how the impact on the small producers and the businesses that are here in Northern Ireland. For instance, even diesel is changing red diesel to white diesel next month, and suddenly we have an increased cost of hundreds of thousands coming into our business, and we need to see how we're going to fill that gap, or how we're going to pass on those costs. That's going to have a detrimental impact on many businesses in Northern Ireland, and I think politicians have to take a step back and study how are those decisions affecting businesses overnight.
Thank you. And finally, Steve.
Thank you. The business community never asked for the protocol, but we knew that we needed to avoid no deal. And when it was signed, we said that we needed 4 things, and those things remain true today, which is mitigations, derogations, compensation, and representation. And I think the last piece is particularly important, because there's lots of engagement, there's lots of conversations, there's lots of people talking and listening to each other. But actually that representation piece and a structure around that to formally deal with these issues, where the people on the ground actually understand how these things will land or will work, I think that's critical. So for me, the first thing is that structure. The second thing is an SPS deal, even for now. But an SPS deal for now is better than no SPS deal that we have currently. And then the last thing is stop these false wars that we're engaged in. UK don't trust the EU don't trust the UK. but both sides seem to trust us. So let's try to get into a position where we can collectively resolve those problems, and enough of the fighting and more of the solution finding.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That's a really good note to finish this on. And I'd like to thank, on behalf of everybody, all of our witnesses, what's been extremely enlightening and hopefully a very helpful session. We'll take it away and make hopefully a set of recommendations that help you all with what you want to achieve.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.